Well, let's continue the conversation around this. The French President Emmanuel Macron is visiting Washington in an effort to plead Europe's case on the Ukrainian war. Newzroom Afrika's United States correspondent Simon Marks live for us in Washington, D.C. this evening. Simon, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the visit by the French President to Washington. What will he be hoping for, particularly as it regards Ukraine's case?
Well, I think, Golly, that specifically Emmanuel Macron is basically a stalking horse. I mean, he's the first European leader to cross the threshold of Donald Trump's White House in the president's second term. Then on Thursday, the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer will be here. And both of them, I think, are going to want to gauge just how serious President Trump is about allying the United States with Vladimir Putin in Russia. I mean, here we are on the third anniversary of this war, and the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has already put out a statement saying that it's been 3 years since the Russian Federation launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in clear violation of the United Nations Charter and international law. He says that the war in Ukraine not only poses a grave threat to the peace and security of Europe, but also to the very foundations and core principles of the United Nations. So that's Antonio Guterres up at UN headquarters in New York. Here in Washington, D.C., we still have heard nothing from the White House to mark the third anniversary of this war. Normally, in the past 2 years, the Biden administration issued statements at dawn, unveiled new military assistance packages for Ukraine, imposed fresh sanctions on Russia. There's been none of that today. Instead, French President Emmanuel Macron joined President Trump in the Oval Office within the last couple of hours to participate in a G7 leaders call. And the United States posture going into that was that the G7 statement that the other leaders are hoping to distribute on this third anniversary of the war must not accuse Russia of aggressive behavior or of being the aggressor in this conflict. So there is just a massive chasm between where European leaders currently stand and where the United States government now stands on Ukraine. President Trump accused of already giving Vladimir Putin pretty much everything that he wants in early stage peace discussions. No membership of NATO for Ukraine, a seat around the table at the G7 for Vladimir Putin, a revived geostrategic and business relationship with Russia, and also simultaneously the United States government focused on basically securing the rare earths, those valuable minerals like lithium that lie on Ukrainian soil. The US wants 50% of them for generations to come to repay America for the generosity that it has bestowed on Ukraine over the last 3 years. So when Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump brief reporters, and they'll be doing so in about 3 hours' time here, it will be the first indication we're going to see publicly of just how serious this breach between Washington, D.C. and its traditional allies in Europe really is.
So it begs the question, Simon, what will President Macron be hoping to achieve then in Washington if the stance from President Trump is that Ukraine is the one that actually caused the war in the first place? It really is a very, very different tone from Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Macron and then Keir Starmer later in the week are going to try and do is see, frankly, whether they can talk Donald Trump down. Are they able to get him to focus not just on the need to provide a vibrant peacekeeping force and to set very, very clear terms of engagement for that multinational peacekeeping force that would be needed on the border between Russia and Ukraine after any peace deal was struck. But will the United States serve as the guarantor, the backstop, as some European leaders have put it, of that peace peacekeeping force. Now, the American position is that the peacekeeping force cannot, the American troops won't be part of it, and that it can't only be made up of NATO members. They want that peacekeeping force to comprise European peacekeepers and some non-European peacekeepers. And it may be even possible that there's an opening there for South Africa, because if the United States wants to see this kind of global joint expeditionary force separating Ukraine from Russia and guaranteeing the peace, there's been talk here in Washington about the possibility of Indian peacekeepers being part of that. Maybe this is an opening for South Africa to help try and warm what has become a very, very cold relationship between Washington, D.C. and Pretoria over the last 2 or 3 weeks. But the European leaders want to guarantee themselves that Donald Trump is focused on providing those security guarantees for Ukraine, because in the first efforts that the Trump administration made to get Zelensky to hand over his rare earths, those valuable minerals that the Americans want to get their hands on, they were doing so without offering any security guarantees to Ukraine, which is why Volodymyr Zelensky looked at the document that was thrust in front of his face and said, thanks, but no thanks. So this is all about trying to get people at least to see where there are any areas of commonality in their approach, even if the United States no longer buys the argument that in discussions about Ukraine there should be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, nothing decided without Ukraine's involvement and approval.
Simon, thank you very much for that particular update. Our Washington correspondent talking to us on the anniversary of the third invasion, or should I say the third anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia.